So in the brand new update, Tycoon just added in the Claymore, which people just see this as a better landmine and no more than that. It's just an item that you place down and you get a kill with. However, there is much more to it. In this video, guys, I will be teaching you some core mechanics about the Claymore, on what actually works on it, what doesn't work, and then at the end, I will also be teaching you guys some really cool strategies which I was able to make up. And I have to say, this thing is way more fun than a lot of people give it credit for. So anyway, let's just jump right into it. So the first thing I'd like to teach you is that you can actually create a chain explosion with it, and by just shooting at it with a gun, you can explode it. Any explosive also works. Now, the next thing which I'd like to teach you is, unfortunately, the Claymore will not be working very effectively on vehicles. Because, for example, people thought that they could be using this to make sure that they don't end up dying when they're in a ship. They thought that the Claymore travels with the ship. However, unfortunately enough, the second you just place it on a ship, it ends up exploding, which is very sad. Unless when it doesn't explode, all you have to do really is just start moving with it, and then the Claymore will end up exploding as well. So unfortunately enough, you could not use this on ships or really any other vehicles that are going to be moving, which is really sad. So the next thing which I'd like to also walk you through is that the Claymore does also react to the player that places it. So for example, if you place it too close to you, you might just end up killing yourself, which is actually pretty bad. However, you could always use the feature of being able to explode the Claymore yourself by simply baiting people into a spot, and then you step on the Claymore at the perfect time when the enemy is near you. You'll be able to kill both yourself and the enemy as well. So to whoever that doesn't actually care about their kill to death ratio, well, this is gonna be a great strat. So anyway, I'm gonna be walking you guys through some strategies now after teaching you the core mechanics. So the first thing I'd like to teach you is that you can actually use this as a very powerful explosive against tanks or really any other vehicles. So you could set traps on these vehicles really well. So for example, I'm going to be using the Leopard right here, and I'm going to be driving into this. And I did manage to actually take a little bit of damage. It's not too much, but it's always going to be semi-useful if you do not have the landmine or the C4 to do that for you. However, in terms of vehicle combat, the best use case I was actually able to find for the Claymore is going to be using it against planes, because planes do take more damage than most other vehicles in this game due to damage multiplier. So for example, right here, I'm going to be spawning in maybe an F-35. You know what, let me spawn in a vehicle with a little bit less health. So the Growler here is going to be a perfect example, and the second I actually run into these, I'm just going to end up dying straight away. So this is going to be extremely effective against players who are trying to take off with their planes. And I know a lot of people in this community really do hate the people that spam planes. Unfortunately, if you do manage to actually place the Claymore right on top where the enemy will be spawning their plane, it will not be working very effectively because the enemy spawns in the air and then they drop down a little bit with their vehicle. It's just the way in which the mechanic of spawning in works in this game, so the explosion will not fully be able to connect. That's why I fully recommend you guys to be placing it on the runway and not on top on where the enemy spawns. Now the next strategy which I also have for you guys is some unique spots in which you could actually place the Claymore which work very effectively. Personally, I have found a very good use case for actually placing the Claymore roughly behind the vehicle spawners. So most enemies, when they end up going for a vehicle, so for example, I'm going for a helicopter right here, and I try to spawn in a vehicle, the Claymore immediately explodes. So if the enemy shield is not on, this will be very useful in actually trapping them and getting them killed. Another popular spot which people also like to go to is going to be their cash collect. So for that reason, I like to actually place the Claymore very close to the place where you collect cash, because the second I'm going in to collect my cash, I would immediately explode, and this is very sick, especially when you're trying to raid enemies. And the next strategy which I also have for you guys is going to be placing the Claymore around tight corners. This is a very good strategy, especially when the enemy is trying to raid your bunker. Keep in mind that they can actually see the red lines through the wall. However, if you manage to place it correctly, then the enemy might end up not seeing it, which is very good. However, I do also see some people which like to use this strategy on doors, which technically I guess it could work if you place the Claymore on both sides, but once again, the red line is existent, and that is kind of annoying since people can once again see this, and that would easily give you away. Now, another strategy which I also have for you is going to be called the gas station trapping, and this one also works kind of efficiently. However, sometimes you might need to pair it up with other explosives, since the Claymore might end up not doing enough damage to actually explode the gas station. So right here, I'm going to be picking the C4 for the sake of this, so you will basically be having a double explosion in a sense. Of course, the Claymore placements could be a lot better, but however, if you just end up stepping in here, you're gonna just end up dying. And right here, even if the tank has blowout panels, it will not be able to save you because it just gets stuck and the tank will get one-tapped after that gas station explosion actually goes off. And you could also pair up these two extremely well in terms of killing the bridge too, because the C4 cannot explode on its own. That's kind of always the issue with it. However, if you manage to just place the C4 next to the Claymore on a little bit of an elevated surface, when the enemy is basically going up the bridge, they might actually end up not seeing it. So for example, right here, I'm just driving around mindlessly, and from a distance, I really don't see this, so I'm probably not gonna be expecting any trap to be set. Like, this is kind of hard to actually see. However, once you actually drive over it, if you combine the overall power of the C4 and the Claymore, this might end up being very useful in terms of killing vehicles, especially because you do not have to use the C4 manually. And there are situations when you really do not have the time to do that. But anyway, guys, for the time being, that's everything I have for you all in today's video. Do let me know in the comment section down below what other strategies you are also able to find for the Claymore. There are always many unique ones, so I'd like to hear what you guys also have in store. Anyway, see you guys next video, have a great day, and thank you so much to all my channel members.